Okay, so today we'll be continuing from where we left yesterday. So this would be session 2, part 1. And the last topic that we discussed was Azure resources and resource groups. So now when we talk about Azure resources, resources are instances of database, instances of a virtual machine, instances of maybe another storage service that we are using. By instance, we mean a individual entity. For example, within one account, you might have one virtual machine, two virtual machine, maybe even 10, 15, 20, depending upon your use case, right? Now, each and every time you create a virtual machine or you create a database or you create, let's say, a storage service, instance, you are essentially you are making a resource. So the journal terminology for an instance, as when you talk in generic terms, because a virtual machine instance is you creating a virtual machine. A storage blob is you creating an instance of the Azure Storage Blob service. Creating a database is an instance of the Azure Database Service, right? Now, in general, when you want to refer to the instances that you have created, you call them resources. Now, when you have multiple resources, for example, when we talk about Azure, I said that we do not need to think from one user's point of view. Do not imagine that you are the only one who's using Azure. Let's say if you were in an organization that was maybe having, maybe a few hundred applications, out of that, maybe 4 or 5 for HR, 4 or 5 for marketing, 20 to 25 for IT, where you have some front end code written, some back end code written. So basically, you have vast variety of resources that are deployed throughout your organization. Now, to help you manage those resources, Azure gives you a concept of resource groups. So resource groups is essentially grouping those resources logically. For example, if you have 4 virtual machines for the IT department, and then you have 10 virtual machines for the HR department, in that case, you could group similar purpose machines together so that you could apply some policies around them. For example, if I want that these machines should be accessed by anyone who is in the HR group, for example, let's say those machines are running some software that has to do something with maybe payroll. We do not want the payroll information to be shared with all the employees, right? It's confidential. It's only you who knows it, or the payroll department who knows everyone's payroll information. So in that case, what happens is you can group similar resources together so that you could apply policies, so that you could apply roles, you could apply permissions that this person would be able to access this, or this is the budget that I want to set. So it's logical grouping of resources that comes under Azure resource groups. If anyone has a doubt on Azure resource groups, please raise your hand. If not, give me a thumbs up using the Zoom reactions. Just want to be sure that everyone is understanding the concept. Okay. Okay, I see quite a few thumbs up. That gives me a confirmation that no doubts on resources and resource groups. Moving forward, subscriptions. Now, resource groups, as I was talking about, they are more logical segmentation. Yes, Gautam, go ahead. You're on mute.
Okay. So the Azure resource is an instance that we created, or every task that we do, like on the cloud, is a resource.
No, not every task that you do, everything that you create on the cloud is a resource. For example, a virtual network, for example, a virtual machine, for example, a database, a storage service. So if we go back to the definition, you can see Azure resources are the basic building blocks of Azure, which can be anything that is created, provisioned, or deployed. So you could either create them, you could either provision them, or you could either deploy them. Make sense?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
that is actually creating something. So whatever you create, that could be accessed, or maybe a virtual network, that is all, or a subnet group. Anything that you are creating, that would be used by other services or would be used by you comes under a resource. And when you group similar resources together, or you group them for any whatsoever reason, for example, a very good reason would be that, we want to group different departments in, we do not, we want isolation. We do not want IT department to be viewing the data of HR department. That might be confidential data. That's where you apply a resource group, and then you can be like, okay, I want to apply certain policies that members of this group would be able to access this information, so that you do not have to give, you could be doing that with every resource, but it's better to do that as a group so that it makes your life a little easy. Like, for example, uh, to give you an idea, let's say let's talk about Concordia. Hypothetically, if there was a rule that only JMSP students can enter the JMSP building, and this is again hypothetical, okay? So in that case, you could, rather than applying each permission to, each one of you, there could be a case where all of you will be put in one group, and the permission will be all the people other than JMSP cannot enter JMSP. Just an example. Make sense? So rather than doing it, pinpointing each one of your resource, put them in a group, apply the permission together, makes your life a little easy to manage.
Thank you.
You're most welcome. Okay. So I have a few things in the chat. Azure resource is an instance that we created. So that's you, Gautam. I think that's cleared. Provision means, okay. So Bhargav, when you talk about provision, deployed, these are created. These three terms are referring to you creating something. It's again synonyms. They're used in different contexts. For example, when you create something, you're actually creating a file, right? You create a file because you're not copying it. You are typing something and you're creating it. You create, let's say, a bucket where you're storing some data. So like a folder is something that you will create. Provisioned is more of like you start a virtual machine. You did not write the operating system on your own, but you created a virtual machine which you have, used a template, let's say Windows or Linux or whatever. So you've provisioned it. Deployed is, moving things in production. So these three terms, I would say, they're used very interchangeably, very, synonyms of each other, depending upon which service you're talking about. But at the end of the day, if you go to Azure, you click on create, you either create a database, you either create a virtual machine, you either create a storage blob, you are technically referring to a resource. Does that make sense? Okay, awesome. So for the nesting part, let me come back to you later, Zhao Yang, just because it's going to be beyond the scope for many people right now. Let's take it up in the break. I'll answer that for sure, but just a while, okay? Coming back to Azure subscriptions, and today I might do this quite frequently, just the reason being, I am bound by the time. Yeah, see, we've already got 90 participants. Maybe we might have more coming up across the way. So if I answer everything that's beyond the content, we'll never be able to finish the content. The content is quite vast. Plus, we are adding practical to it so that you can understand things when you see them in front of you. So please understand that. I'll try my level best to answer as much as I can. However, I'll take most of them out, when we stop the recording and when we go in the break. Okay. Talking about Azure subscriptions, what makes subscriptions different from resource group is that in subscriptions, you are concerned more about the billing aspect. For example, today when we create a free accounts, we all will do that together. I hope all of you are here from Concordia active students. Even if you are pass outs like me, I was just testing this thing 15 minutes ago. My Concordia email ID still works and I'm still eligible for a free Azure account. That means I do not even need to attach my credit card. Now that's what makes Azure different from AWS, right? If you create an AWS account, you need your credit card, though they will not charge you because they give you something called as the free tier. Similarly, in Azure as well, you have free services. But even before you go to those free services, as a student, because you have your student account, you would be given additional benefits, additional perks. That is, you do not even need to attach your credit card. You get certain services free for 1 month with $100 credit. And then after that, if you want to continue using Azure, you can attach your credit card and again, 1 year services will be free. So it is similar to AWS plus some student benefits that you will get. You'll understand that in the next step when we do the practical, just in about 5 minutes. But before I go on to that, let's say if we were in an organization, we need to do segmentation, right? Let's say if we are a multinational company, we might have an office in Canada, one office in US, one office in UK, right? So we are in different tax boundaries. So we need different bills, right? US will not be paying for my Canada location. Canada will not be paying. It actually depends upon your how your company is organized. But if it's a multinational company, you might want to pay your UK bills from UK and US bills from US and Canadian bills from Canada. Does that make sense to all of you? So when you want to do that segmentation, one big account, you want different bills for different places. When you want to divide billing, when you want to create policies like, let's say, let's give an example. I'll pick up a name from the chat, like Gotham. So let's say Gotham is the vice president in the company. So we are like, vice president is allowed to spend $2,000. Then let's say I am a developer in the company. A developer is allowed to spend $500, for Azure. So when we using subscriptions, we can have a cap so that because if it's an Azure account, you do not want your employee to just go on Azure and create resources worth, maybe hundreds and thousands of dollars. You need to have a cap. So whenever you're concerned with the money, when you want to, have a different segmentation of money, segmentation of bill, you want to have restrictions on what a user can do in terms of cost, that is what you handle via subscriptions. Does that make sense to all of you? Give me a thumbs up if it does. If it doesn't, you can raise your hand. So I've opened the list. It's only 13 of you who are active, 17. The others, please be a little more active. Uh, I'm totally fine if you guys do not have your videos on. That is still doable. If you do, it's better. But at least a thumbs up. It gives me a confirmation that everyone is understanding what is being covered. Okay. So Azure AD stands for Azure Active Directory. We'll talk about this later, not in detail right now. The certification does expect you to know what's the full form of AD, that's Active Directory. So you should be knowing that. But anything apart from that, we would talk more about it later as the time comes. Okay. So that's something. Azure AD is a very, very popular service, which a lot of organizations are using for managing their users. So for example, I'm not sure how many of you might have seen this, but if you work in an organization that is using Azure Active Directory, it will give you information like when you click on your name, it will tell you who your manager is, who your manager's manager is, and things like that. It helps you keep a hierarchy of your organization, which could be kind of useful, really, really useful, depending upon which organization you're working for. So it gives you vast variety of services for authentication, authorization, getting people in, a lot of other services as well, but something that could be discussed at a later on point of time. But I hope everyone's clear with subscriptions. And then the next concept which comes over here is management groups. So management groups are a way to provide and manage policies, compliance for multiple subscriptions in a large scale enterprise. Please understand here, we are not talking about a 4 people company, a 5 people company, a 20 people company. We're talking about a few thousand employees, at different locations. That's when you might be using the management groups. So this is more of like, applying policies at a jurisdiction level. Now, yesterday, someone was talking about that Europe's data should not go out of Europe, and Canada's data should not go out of Canada, and US data should not go out of Canada. If you are in an organization that needs to follow those strict compliance rules and regulations, in that case, you would be using management groups, which allows you to provide a way to manage access, policies, and compliance for multiple subscriptions in a large scale enterprise. Does this make sense to all of you? What I'm telling you right now is what is important for the exam. In reality, obviously, these concepts can be very, very vast, but at a simple scale, resource is anything that you could deploy, like a virtual machine, like a database, like a storage service, a network, or something of that sort. When you group resources together, they become a resource group. When you have subscriptions, you are dividing resources on the bill that they would be generating. And when you talk about management groups comes at the top of the hierarchy, where you could be creating, different logical division so that it's one company, but different rules and regulations. So it's to govern the policies in that way. Does this make sense to all of you? Any questions, raise your hand. If not, give me a thumbs up. Okay, awesome. Now is the fun time because now we are going to start with the practical. I hope all of you are accessing this workshop from a laptop. If you're doing it from a phone, please do not attempt the practical. Please focus on my screen. I'll help you get through things. Other than that, you should be able to do the practical along with me. I'll not be super fast. These slides will be important. The next three slides just about to come to them. But before that, Ankit, you have a question. You can go ahead.
Yeah. So yesterday you mentioned about route management. Is it also related to like the concept of management groups that you explained just now?
Can you go give me the context? Where were we
Okay.
talking about that?
So yesterday, like you mentioned about hierarchy, like how the basically how the company is organized. So you have the route management, and then like you have HR, IT, and marketing reporting to it, reporting to
Yes.
the route management. So is it that like this particular concept of management group applies to the route management?
Okay, let me get back to that place and I'll explain that to you with the diagram that I had.
Yeah. Thank you.
Give me a moment. I'm just opening the, okay, let me go back to share my screen. I hope you can see this. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you are talking about the route management group. So route management is not a different concept. The concept is a management group itself. So when you go into management groups and you start by creating them, the first one that you create is route. So let me give you an example. For example, whoever is the head of the company, in a big company, it's not one person, it might be a group of people. Let's refer to them as CXO suite. Like for example, CEO, CTO, CMO, and all the chief executives or chief
Board
dash
of directors,
officers.
those people. Yes.
Yeah. So that CXO suite might be the root management group, or it might be the IT department, or it might be the chief technology officer, whatever the company organization is, right? That one entity will have access to this account, which will then be able to manage the other sub accounts. So
Understood.
whatever rules are given to human resource will be decided by root management. Whatever roles are given to apps will be decided by human management, and obviously the root management could override them as well. So these are the root management group is nothing. It's just the first management group, which has the capacity to control everything that comes under it. By default, when you create your account and you do not create any management group, you are the root yourself because you're not using that logical division. So if you do not use the concept of management group, you are the management group within yourself. But if you are using the concept of management group, in that case, you can create people under you and you could be dividing the authority that you want to give them across your account.
Got it. And then like in that case of example, human resource would also be a management group which reports like to the higher management group. So we can
Yes.
have that hierarchical structure.
So,
Got it.
so you see, Geo Region 1 reports to production. Production is a
Production.
part of IT. IT is a part of route management.
Yeah. Okay.
So whoever is given the access, for example, the chief marketing officer will be the owner for the marketing management group. This chief technology officer might be the
Understood.
owner for the IT, and chief human resource person will be for HR. It's
Got
just
it.
an example.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're most welcome. So at the end of the day, coming back to what Ankit just discussed so that no one gets confused, we have the same concepts. We have resources, we have resource groups, we have subscriptions, and we have management groups. In management groups, if you start using the concept, as I said, it's for large scale organizations, but Azure does not know who you are, right? When you create your account, you're all treated as one. It does not know if you are a huge organization or if you are an individual. That's why it would not be at a spot to give different resources to different people. And that's when, if you think you are a large organization or if there is the need, you could enable management groups. But again, this is something which is totally optional. Now, coming back to sharing my screen, there are a few things that I would be doing on my screen. First, observe my screen, and then you guys can, continue doing it on yours. I'll give you ample of time. Just bear with me. Now, since all of you are currently the students at Concordia, or maybe even the pass outs, we get something called as the Azure student account, which is totally free. for us for first month. Now, I'm not going into the marketing details. I'm not a salesperson for Azure, not going in details, but yeah, you can see this. In simple words, what we are getting is we get $100 of Azure credit to get started, and no credit card is required. All you need is your Concordia account. After you're done using this $100 limit, you might have to attach your credit card to get these services, which are 12 months free for virtual machine, 12 months free for database, 12 months free for the storage account, and so on and so forth. Okay. So now what I'll be doing is I'll first create my account and then you guys can do the same. Let me share this link with you. All of you, first step, please open this link, and only do this if you're doing it from a web browser, because like from a laptop or from a desktop, from a big screen. I do not want people getting confused using their mobile phones to create the account. However, if you want to, by all means you can. But my target is that the account should be created in the next 10 minutes, not more than that. So for those of you who already have an Azure free account, you guys know what the steps are, because from the input that we got, the registrations that we got for the event, many of you have already worked on Azure previously. So you might have your accounts, you know how to get into them. But for those of you who do not know and are using Azure for the very first time, as I said, you do not need to attach your credit card. It's totally safe. You're getting $100 free. Again, I'm not someone who's selling Azure. It's just a practical thing that might help you. Not required in the certification. Again, let me make myself very clear. The practical is not required in the certification. However, it's a very good way to understand what the services would be covered. So whatever theory I teach you, if you are able to do even a part of it, you'll get a lot of clarity in terms of what needs to be done. Okay. So if you are all on this page, there is an option called Start for Free. The Start for Free, the green button that you see, click on Start for Free. It's going to ask you to log in. You need to log in with your Concordia ID. Okay, you need to log in with your Concordia student ID, and only then will it be free. So please make this, a point that you're logging in with this Concordia student ID to get this for free. Uh, it's live.concordia.ca, and then it should take you to your organization login page, that is Concordia, because this workshop is for the graduate students of Concordia. Now, anyone who's viewing the recording and does not have this, you might be using your university's account, your school's account, your college account, whatever that is. So if it's an educational account, Microsoft will give you free access. Just hit next. Since I said this workshop is for Concordia, and I'm a password of Concordia, so I have my account. I'm just going to log in into my account. They have multi-factor authentication. So let me enter my MFA code. Once you do this, you will be in the page called Azure for Students. Get $100 in credits and free access to popular cloud service, plus developer tools like Visual Studio Code. Okay, that's not highly important for us, but yeah, you are getting $100 of credits without a credit card. Nothing better than that. If you guys are on the screen, give me a thumbs up. And if someone who wants to do the practical and is still not on the screen, raise your hand. As I said, if you're not from using a laptop or a desktop, or you're not being able to do this right now, by all means, you can have a look at the recording, which will be uploaded by tonight. It'll be shared with all of you, and then you could do the step. So I see quite a few thumbs up. That means that whoever wants to do the practical and is doing the practical has got this. You can fill this out. Obviously, I'll have to stop sharing my screen because this is personal information now. So region is Canada, name is there, that everyone knows, but the other information, I'll just stop sharing my screen, fill the form, agree, and then click on sign up. I think all of you could do this on your own. Nothing super difficult. Just give me about 2 minutes so that I could stop sharing the screen, fill that form up so that I do not expose my personal information. And then I'll continue just 1 minute. let's go back to sharing my screen. Okay. So, okay, for the attendance, guys, just hold on a little bit. Let's give it about an hour and a half. Just before we go off for the break, we'll take the attendance. I do not want people to be distracted with that right now. So, Ruchika, the attendance link should be shared around 12 itself when we go for the break. And can the email address in the form be different from the one of Concordia? Honestly, I've just entered the Concordia email address. It doesn't matter. Just go. If you're done signing up, I use different Concordia and it seems to work. Uh, if you've used something else and it's working, that's great. I'm not like without looking at what that is, I might not be able to comment, but yeah. So let me hit my account and this is going to take me, uh, yep, awesome. So I am inside my Microsoft Azure educational account. I can see my Concordia email address. That means I definitely might be having quite a few free things. And the best thing is just look on the left, it says I've got available credits of $100 out of $100. That's why I did not create an account with Concordia previously, right? I do have a corporate Azure account, but I'm not using that obviously because I want all of us to have the same UI so that you guys can understand better. Since it's sunny, let me just move my screen a little bit. Yeah. So you see that I have 100 out of $100 and the days that we have is 366. So 1 year worth of free services. Just look at the right, what we have for free. We have $100 for addition, in addition to experiment any service. Plus we have virtual machines for free, blob for free, computer vision for free, and a lot of other stuff. Now, when we do after AZ-900, trust me, this is going to be super interesting for you. The next certification that we prepare for, starting session 4 onwards, right? The 4th day of the workshop onwards, 4th and 5th day basically, is AI-900. That's Azure, that's Azure for artificial intelligence fundamentals. And over there, we'll be looking at computer vision API, where we would be uploading our own images and it will tell us what the contents of those images are, the confidence, and a lot of other fun stuff. And that's why it's kind of important. If you have an account, you'll have a lot of fun interactions with Azure in the next coming up sessions. Okay, I won't go too deep into this. I hope you guys have the screen. Let me see if anyone's having any issues in the chat. Uh, okay. I logged my Concordia, but you cannot see $100. Okay, let me help you with that. Can you please discuss regarding how we can give free exam also when you get the time? Yes, I'll discuss about that. Today, at the end of the session, we'll be talking about how you could be giving the certification for free. Again, a lot of FAQs, but just hold on till the end. We're not going to spend the teaching time right now on discussing that. I meant on the second screen that asks for email. I have $0 credit. I didn't follow. I'm sorry. Could you please repeat what you were mentioning about? I have someone has 136. It gives me the message you cannot access this right now. Okay. So now let me first answer a few FAQs that I've seen in the chat, and then we could maybe take this on a case by case basis. Basically, if you do not see the same thing that I see on my screen, you might be seeing an option on your screen saying that start your education trial. Okay. I might ask one of you to share your screen so that everyone can be getting an idea about that. To answer your question, Gautam, that you did not follow, I was just telling that we have $100 of credit for free for the next 366 days from Azure. In addition to that, we also have a couple of free services that we can test in this next 1 year. So after AZ-900, the next certification that we prepare for in this workshop series, that would have a lot of content related to computer vision, which is going to be very interactive APIs where you upload your pictures and it does a lot of cool stuff for you. Today, it's going to be the boring stuff. Okay. So now let's see who did not. Taib, I'll stop sharing my screen. You could share your screen just for one example because previously I was having the same issue. Now
Hi, thank you. Just a second, please.
Yeah. because many of you might face something similar. So I'll help you figure that out.
I follow the steps that you told us,
Yes.
and this is my desktop that you can see, but I cannot see the credit or the options
Okay.
that you have
Okay.
in
I'll give you a URL in the chat. Open that, please.
the link.
Yeah, I've given you a new URL in the chat. It's
Okay.
called portal.azure.com. Please open that.
Mhm.
Yes. Can you please type subscriptions in the search at the top? Yes. Please click on subscriptions.
Done.
Okay. So it seems like you did not get that activated. Can you please click on Microsoft Azure again on the top left of your navigation bar, top left, where it says Microsoft Azure, so that I can see the dashboard. Let me see what's up. It's not even giving any message, right? And when you go to the link that I shared with you, what's the message that you're getting over there?
And you can see I logged from my Concordia account.
Yeah, just click on that.
View account.
No, I don't think that should be. Yeah, just go on view account. I don't know why, because all the people by default get this. Okay. Can you go back to the link that I shared previously where you had to fill up the form? Were you done filling the form?
Yeah, just I follow the route that you mentioned, but I don't know why I don't have that credit, and also the options that you have in
Can you
your
open
screen.
one tab on your left where you have the account opened, my account?
Here.
One more on the left, the form that you filled. No, on your left. One tab.
I'm just starting from the first, so
Okay.
maybe I can share it.
Yeah. Okay, I get that. So you can stop sharing your screen. I'll get back the screen. Okay.
Thank you.
And Preetham has shared something on the chat. Again, this this is different. Again, we do not create accounts every day, and the steps, the UI changes very frequently on cloud providers. And this is one problem that I feel that is lagging in a lot of videos as well. So when we try to learn from videos, we are not able to see the same screen that what because the UI has changed by the time you're watching a video online. So this is a very common problem. We do not need to be worried about that. Let's see what this is. Someone shared this link in the chat, and this is for Concordia students. So my dashboard has definitely changed, but if I go to my subscriptions, I can see Azure for students. This is the subscription which we are.
Sir, if I am new, so I should see this only Azure for student subscription name, right?
Yeah, if you see Azure for students, that's a good spot. This is what we are looking forward for.
But I have I have this subscription name for Azure for students, but I have another one. But I don't.
IITS?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so that's how Concordia has configured their Azure. Uh, I don't want to comment on if it's the right way of doing it or not, but I don't know why they've done it, but
I got
I'm not
it.
going into that. But technically, we'll only be using the one Azure for students because that's the one that we are getting for free. We do not want to use anyone else's subscription, and we do not want them to be paid. So yeah, it's required that you go and create an account. You need to use your like Concordia ID, and it'll give you a free education account. Let me search for education. Yeah, there it is. Thank you for that, Nitin. Okay, so again, guys, so I mean, obviously, I cannot answer all these questions because they depend upon a case-to-case basis, like the email address that you're using, because that's how Concordia might have configured it. I've been using the one at live.concordia.ca. I've not faced any issues. It has absolutely created an account for me, which has got everything for free. Just on the top navigation bar, search for education, and it'll tell you what free stuff do you have in the education package that comes along with your Concordia ID. Okay. Shamila, go ahead. I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask for this, the practical things in this sessions, all these sessions. I just wanted to know, do we really need the $100? Because previously, I think I created an account. So right now, 1 year has passed, and that's why it doesn't give me the $1 anymore.
Okay. In that case, you can observe my screen. As I said, for the certification, the practicals are not required, but it's just for you to understand what's happening in the background. So if you have exhausted the free tier limit, you can be looking at my screen when I do the practical. They're not going to ask you to do a practical in the exam for sure.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Most welcome. Okay, so I think different people, different things. Please, guys, monitor the chat. I'm seeing that you are going for the student subscription. We're logging out, you're logging back in, you're using the @live.concordia.ca email address. You're getting a lot of stuff for free. That's great, okay? Because the way we are all configured under the Concordia accounts is not something which we control. We are all, using the student access. So in that case, things are a little different, right? So I might not be able to answer them, but I hope everyone is able to get into their accounts. If you are inside portal.azure.com, search for education, open this, and if you see something of this sort, we are good to go. Again, reminding all of you, practicals for AZ-900 are optional. They're not required in the certification. This is just for you guys to understand how we've been talking about resources so that you could see maybe a live resource in action. Okay, Khalid, I think you have something totally different from the others. If you want to share your screen, you could do that real quick. Okay, so just to get a quick poll, how many of you have got your Azure accounts actively? Give me a thumbs up. Okay, so to answer this, Khalid, this is not an Azure problem. This is more of like your Concordia account problem, and I might not be able to help you out with this. Again, I'll give the same solution. Please observe my screen while I do the practical. Practical is not a part of the certification. It is for all of you as an additional, to understand, because when you are learning a concept, I cannot just tell you that, virtual machines are created by clicking the button. I need to go and click the button so that you guys can understand. Let me repeat myself one last time. The practical, you guys do not need to do it if you do not want to. If you want to do it, by all means, you can do it. Now we all have an Azure account. Let's proceed further with the slides and we'll come back to the practical. So, okay, so we did create our account. This was the form that we filled. Again, all these steps are given in the slides. So once you are referring to the slides, you would all have an idea about them. Moving on, this is the education overview by searching for education, again given in the slides. This is what we're all getting. It's a little different for all of us, but technically somewhere close to what you see over here. And this is how you can go. This is like the dashboard from where you will be working on services. So now we would go and create an Azure resource altogether, which is the fun part, because we will be creating a virtual machine. Okay. Please observe my screen, what this practical is about. We are going to create a virtual machine. Please listen to me very carefully. This part, for those of you who are not doing it along with me, or you feel that you're not confident doing it along with me, do not do it. It's absolutely fine. Observe my screen, understand what is happening so that you can, you know what happens in the cloud. This certification does not require you to know how to do the practical. However, if you see it, you'll understand a lot of things that you might not understand the same with the slides going on. Okay, so first we'll create a resource and then we're going to verify if a resource has been created. I will be going additionally into, even connecting to the resource. But again, for those of you who are not comfortable doing that, it's okay. You do not have to. You can just see my screen. For those of you who do not want to do it immediately with me right now, you could be doing it later when you have the access to the video. You can mark the point to the time when it's 10:50 a.m. in the video. You can just go forward, forward, forward. And this is where you'll be able to see it. Okay. Let me go back to sharing my Azure screen and tell you how to create a virtual machine. Now, a few things to tell you before I start. Please listen to me very carefully. It is not 100% free account. My usage limit, because I've not attached a credit card, is only $100. Okay. And along with that, I have these set of free services. So I would recommend all of you to stay within your limits. If you are using an account where you have attached a credit card, please be extra careful. If you create a machine that is beyond the free tier or beyond the free usage subscription of Azure, you might be paying for it. So just be careful about that. In a corporate environment, obviously, architects make the decision of how much RAM they want to go with, how much processing power they want to go with, and then they come up with a tag that this is our budget and this is what we want to use. So I'll help you create one machine, not going in the details of how everything is going to work out in terms of what I'll be selecting, but for the most part of it, you'll see me take decisions that are not going to be heavy on the budget. And Ruchika, please close the form right now. I want the form to be open at 12. Do not want any student to be distracted right now. Okay. So let's click on Microsoft Azure at the top left. This takes us to the dashboard. This is like, portal.azure.com. This is the home page. Out of here, we will be working with the virtual machine service where we'll be creating a virtual machine. So to do that, I will go inside virtual machines. Now this is the page from where we can manage our virtual machines. Again, please understand, I'll be using the free subscription. I'm creating one resource, so no resource group required. And along with that, no management group, obviously, because it's a single account. I'll hit create. I'll click on Azure Virtual Machine. The subscription is Azure for Students. That is the free subscription that I have. Resource group, please understand, I do not have resources. It's the first resource I'm creating in this account. Hence, there is a new resource group. There's no, there's no group that I'm using. It's just one resource. Eventually, if I was creating 5, 10, 15 resources, I would have grouped them into one resource group. But right now, because I want it for free, please understand this. I want it for free. I'll just be creating one virtual machine. I do not want to overdo on the limit that allows us to use the free service. Okay, so for those of you who are doing the practical with me, how many of you do not have Azure for Student subscription? Please raise your hands. How many of you who are doing the practical with me do not have the Azure for Student subscription? Okay, 3. Please lower your hands. 4, 5. How many of you have the free Azure for Student subscription? Now you guys raise your hands because I just want a quick count, right? How many of you have the... Okay. Most of you have the Azure free subscription. Now, okay, that's a lot. You can all lower your hand. Thank you so much. That's about 40 of you, 40, 50 of you have that. So please understand, for those of you who do not have the free subscription, let's take it up. Let's take this discussion up in the break, because again, it's going to take a lot of time. It's not something that I want to discuss right now because it's going to go beyond the scope. That has something to do with how your accounts were created with the Concordia ID and stuff like that. Let's not get confused in that right now. You can watch the recording and you can do the practical later. For those of you who have the Azure student subscription, please continue. IITA seems to be some other paid subscription at Concordia. You do not want them to be built for something that could be done for free, right? So I would not recommend using the IITA subscription. Please continue using the Azure for students. If you do not have it, it again depends upon a case-to-case basis. Out of 60 or 70 of you who are doing the practical, about 50, 55 have it, and the remaining 10, about 10 of you do not have it. So please cooperate with me. We'll continue with the steps for those who have it. For those who don't, let's take it up, in the break. We'll take this discussion up in the break, just in the best interest of time. So we'll go with Azure for students. We'll not create a new resource group because it's one resource. Let's create a virtual machine name. So let me call it Azure Workshop. Call it Azure Workshop Demo Machine. You can call it anything, but you should know what this refers to so that when you have 10, hundreds and thousands of machines, you would be able to figure out what this is. Region, we talked about region yesterday. And for those of you who are not doing the practical, please pay utmost attention over here. We are selecting the group that is Azure for students. We are selecting Azure Workshop Demo Machine. We are selecting the region. I talked about regions yesterday. The closest to us is Canada Central. So we'll go with Canada Central. The availability options, again, you could be using a zone, you could be using a set, a virtual machine scale set. I'll not be going for no infrastructure redundancy required, because I told you if you have redundancy in the infra, if you have more than one copies in different regions, you will exceed the free tier limit because you're going to have 2 instances running at the same time. Though we have $100 budget to cap that up, but it's not required. If you were in a production environment, you could have selected the redundancy, but in a test environment, we just want one instance. We do not want the same machine in 2 different zones. Does that make sense? Give me a thumbs up if that's clear. Okay. Security type, you could be using either the standard or trusted launch virtual machine. Okay, Gautam, I'll repeat it once again. For availability options, you could be using redundancy. That means having more than one machine deployed in 2 different zones, 2 different regions, if you're using a region pair. But we would not be doing any sort of redundancy, because redundancy is having 2 copies or 3 copies of the same thing. When you have more than one copy, you are paying double the bill. Within the Azure free subscription, you get one machine for 750 hours. If I do the maths, it is maximum number of days in a month is 31. Hours in a day is 24. 31 multiplied by 24 is 744. That technically comes out to be, if you have one virtual machine running throughout the month, your account, and within that specific tier, which I'll talk about later on, it is going to be free. But if you have 2 running, if you're doing redundancy, you are having 2 machines, now your consumption is more than what is free, and hence you might exhaust it and you might be coming in the pay cycle. But since we are using the student account, we have an additional $100 of credit, which I do not want to waste right now. We might need that for any future projects that you might want to do after the workshop. Does that make sense, Gautam? Okay. So no infrastructure redundancy is required on a test machine. This is all tests, so we are not spending money on the redundancy. Doesn't make sense. Security type is standard. Now, image is basically the operating system. Now, just look at this. You have vast variety of options available over here. You have Ubuntu, you have SUSE, you have RHEL, that's Red Hat Enterprise Linux. You have Oracle Linux, you have Debian, you have Windows Server 2022, 2019, 2016, Windows 10 Pro, and Windows 11 Pro. In a paid subscription, you will have even more options. But since we are doing a free subscription, we do not want to exceed that kind of limit. We would be going for, let's say, Windows Server 2022 Data Center Azure Edition. Okay, now just see what just happened. Okay. The moment I selected image, the moment I selected Windows Server, it changed the region. Please understand why. You guys have a different portal than me. Now, honestly, guys, this should not happen because we're using the free same Azure account. Just to be sure, if you guys can confirm, those of you in the chat who are having the issue, is the URL portal.azure.com/ hashtag create / Microsoft.virtualmachine-arm, something of this sort. If your region is changed to any other region, do not worry, even mine changed. I'll explain why. Okay, so regions might change. Do not worry, guys. I'll just come to that. Hold on a bit. You'll understand every bit of it. Okay, just focus on my screen for a while, and then I'll try to answer all the questions. And because I wanted, this is more of like understanding. It's not a practical workshop. Otherwise, we would have given 8 days just to understand the basics of Azure. And honestly, even that might have been less because there is so much to cover. The practical aspect is just for the people to understand the theory that we were doing yesterday, how it can be implemented. So if you are having any difficulties, observe my screen. You do not need to do the practical. It's not absolutely required. Later on, you can look at the video and try to do the practical on your own. And if it still doesn't work out, I'm more than happy to help you in the breaks. I'm more than happy to help you even beyond 4 if it is required. So as long as you guys are willing to give in some extra time and dedication to the practical, don't worry, I'm one of those trainers who's not concerned about the time. Even if it has to go beyond, I'll be there to help you out. Okay, so just be there. Do not worry about that. Focus on my screen. Azure for Students. It created a group by default, depending upon the name that I selected. The region automatically got changed. Now, the reason, the reason this happened was because, the moment I changed the image, that image might not be, best suited for the region that I was using. Let me see. But now if I see, I can still find Canada Central. So I'm going to change that again. The security type is standard, no redundancy required. The architecture supported is x64. This is not something which we are covering right now, not required. If we go in the size, you see you have multiple options, right? And the pricing is different for all of them. So you can see, that they're all here. If you are using a free tier account, please understand, if you're using a free account beyond the student account, only certain machines, certain, of them are free. Not everything is free. That is specifically, if you want to read that, let me search that for you. Azure free. Oh, sorry. I just clicked on the ad. So if I click on what services are free for 12 months, you see the B1S series is free. The B1S is free, not everything. Let me see. Oh, God. Let's see, what do I get free in Windows? I'll have to go through the entire list, see all free services. Let's see where, search for virtual. Okay, so if I go with virtual machine Windows, I have 750 hours of B1S burstable virtual machine for free. Okay, so for those of you who did not get the student subscription activated due to any XYZ reason, we are looking for a B1S. Now, let me tell you what a B1S is. So a B1S is a category of machine that has got one CPU, one RAM. So one virtual CPU, 1 GB of RAM. You can have maximum of 2 disks, and the other things are not super important. So I'm not talking about all the parameters. But when you look at this B series, and I just removed this B1, you can see you have all these, right? As I said, you can customize if you want 2 CPUs, 4 GB RAM, 1 CPU, 1 GB RAM, 2 CPU, 8 GB RAM, and you have options, right? you can choose whatever you want to, what suits best for your use case. They all have different pricing. The more you use, the more expensive it gets. On the right, you can see the pricing. The one that they are giving to us for free is B1S. Now, please understand this very carefully. I'm in the free, I have $100 free. I could be running a B4MS, that is 4 CPUs and 16 GB RAM. That is a lot, right? But it costs me $147. That means the moment I started, my consumption will be done in the next 20 days and all my credits will be gone. Whereas if I look at this machine, it is just costing me $11.39. Obviously, it's much weaker. It's just 1 CPU, 1 GB RAM. It might barely boot up because Windows is not recommended for 1 CPU and 1 GB RAM. It's quite heavy. But just to give you guys an example, you could select the one that works best in your use case. Now, for our use case, since it's just a demo, you can select what you want to. In a real world, I would say you would have to go for something, something better. But here it's a demo. That's why I'm not spending the time to discuss what needs to be done. Obviously, in a production environment, I would be using something like maybe $100, $200, $300 a month if it's production. But right now for test, as long as I just want to test, I just want to see if there is a machine, not even using it, I'll create it and I'll destroy it immediately. I'll be going for a standard B1S, that's 1 CPU and 1 GB RAM, just costs 11.39 a month. And I'm going to destroy it in 1 hour, so my cost would not even be in a few cents.
Sir,
I'll still be left with my $100 credit. Yes, Mohammed.
Sir, from the size portal, how did you select B1?
You go to see all and then you search for it. I
Yes.
searched on the documentation what they're giving for free. I
Yes.
searched for B1 and I found B1.
Yes, then how you select it?
I click on it and then I click on select at the bottom of the screen.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So Gautam, 1 GB is enough only because it is free. They have given 1 GB. So Gautam, 1 GB is not enough. Honestly, it is not. But since it's free for testing, it's not bad. Just to test. Again, let me say this. They will not give you something which you can use in production for free. They're giving you a test account, go test it. You cannot deploy this in production. If you do that, it's going to be very under provisioned and your machine is going to lag a lot. Make sense? Okay, Zawiang, to answer your question, you can have vast variety of CPUs, but again, not in the free tiers. If you look at the other series, they're specialized. So, B1 series is general purpose, D series is general purpose. Let me go to L series. L series is storage optimized. H series is high performance compute. And again, they have different, if you go through their documentation, they'll tell you which CPUs are they using in the background. But again, it comes with a price. Technically, I can sit at my home. I'll tell you the advantage of cloud computing. I could be using a L80SV something, which is like 80 CPUs. I just want to be sure if this is the RAM, the second field, because that was crazy high amount of RAM. Yeah, the second field is the RAM, 640 GB of RAM. 32 disks can be attached to it. It costs you $8,292 plus taxes a month to run it. That's crazy amount of cost associated, right? So we do not want to do this for testing. Technically, you could, it will run crazy amount of workloads, but not required, nowhere close required for testing. But if you are an organization that spends that kind of money and you are in requirement of 640 GB of RAM with a very storage optimized machine, you might be spending this as well. So basically, cloud is giving you the option to select what works best with your use case. Depending upon your requirements, you could be looking at whatever best works for you. So for example, this one is 104 CPUs, 672 GB RAM, costing about 10,000 USD per month. So as I said, a lot of money, and since they exist, someone or the other might be using them. We do not have to. Please do not try experimenting this. You will just, you'll finish your usage within a few seconds or minutes. So just be a little careful about that. And just to bring back the point, I hope no one has attached their credit card. You are all using the free tier account, right? If you have attached your credit card, please be very careful before doing the practical. Only use the machines that are very, very low, and we'll destroy them immediately so that we are not charged for them. Does that make sense to all of you? please give me a thumbs up. I do not want, I will not feel very comfortable proceeding with the practical if everyone understands what they're doing. If everyone does not understand what they're doing, right? So just to say this once again, this is the free tier. If you are in the free tier or you have $100 credit, continue with the practical. If you don't, be careful. You might do the practical, you might spend a few dollars, then you might want to delete the machines immediately so that you do not go in the spot where you're paying for them. Okay, then since it's a Windows machine, you can set the username and password. Let me set this. You okay. Now is the interesting part. Now I think a lot of your questions will be answered. The people who were asking me this yesterday. So as I said, you have inbound ports, right? You can select what, I think, I don't remember who asked this to me. Was it Pranay or was it Gautam? I don't remember. I think one of you asked this question. Will Azure tell us that, if we are opening a port, will Azure tell us that, you have to do it or you do not have to do it? So if you see right now, if I open RDP.
Yeah, it's me, Jeevish. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you open the port for, connecting to your virtual machine, that's the port that you use to connect to your machine. This says this will allow all IP addresses to access your virtual machine. This is only recommended for testing. Using advanced control in the networking tab to create rules to limit inbound traffic to known IP addresses is what you do in production. So this is RDP. If you wanted a web server, for example, you could enable HTTP. The list goes on depending upon your requirement. You could have allowed, if it's a web server that you're trying to create, you'll allow web, you'll allow RDP. If it's a RDP server, you'll just allow RDP. Depends upon what is the use case why you are creating this machine. Does this make sense to all of you? Give me a thumbs up. Again, even if you're not doing the practical, you should be able to understand what's happening at a very broad scale. All we are doing is that, we are just creating a virtual machine and Azure resource. I just clicked on review and create just to see what is happening under the hood, what's happening in the background. So, okay, it's taking some time to load. I did not change anything. I went with the all recommended settings that they had. But before I create, please understand. So it's telling me, okay, you are creating one B1S machine. It's going to cost you, please understand this very carefully, 0.0156 USD per hour. So see, this is not costing me by the month. The first definition that I talked about yesterday, cloud computing is the on-demand delivery of IT resources. I am only paying for the time that I am consuming the service. If I create a machine for 1 hour and I delete it, I am just paying 0.0156 US dollars, which is very, very cheap in comparison to me buying a machine to test it before I can see if it works out for my use case or not. Does everyone understand this? The purpose of this demonstration is not for all of you to do the practical. Again, as I said, it's not a practical course. However, you can follow if you are able to at this pace, or you can look at the video later on. But looking from the certification standpoint of view, you need to understand that the advantage of cloud computing is you just spend a fraction of money, you're having some operational expense, and you are testing, your workload just by doing this, just by creating this machine. Now, when you come down, it will tell you that the subscription is Azure for students. Okay, I'm just going to come to the questions in 2 minutes. Let me explain this. The port thing will be answered in a bit. So the subscription is Azure for student. The resource group, because it's my first resource, it created automatically for me. The virtual machine, this is the name. The region is Canada Central. We talked about regions yesterday. Availability option, no redundancy required. I do not want redundancy because I do not want to spend that kind of money. 2 machines means double the cost. 3 machines means triple the cost. Next, security type is standard. The operating system, I have a choice of choosing it. So I selected Windows Server 2022. Not that I'm going to connect to it, just to give you an example, I'm going to create it and destroy it. Again, connecting to it is not a part of this course. However, if you want to learn that, let's sit in the extra time and we can discuss this. The size is B1S, 1 CPU, 1 GB RAM. I gave it a username. Now, to answer the question that I have in the chat, public inbound port. So this is like a firewall. What connection, once you create the machine, what do you want that machine to accept? Who do you want, who should be able to connect to this machine? So we are telling that we only want people who are using RDP to connect, or the people who are accessing this machine via HTTP to connect. If you were creating a database machine, you might open the port for database, like, MySQL runs on 3306, you might write a rule for that. So Bhargav, does that make sense to you now? You can unmute and you can discuss if you have questions on this. Perfect. I think this should be clear to all of you. If anyone has any questions on public inbound ports, please let me know. If it's all good, give me a thumbs up. Okay. Next, you already have a license. No. Azure Spot, no. We want this SSD, blah, 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 all the default configuration. Again, if I go for a higher size SSD, I'll have to pay for that as well. But I'm just going with the default configuration, not talking a lot about, what is happening in the hood, in the background. Now, to answer the thing that if validation has failed for you, honestly, as I'm saying again and again, I'm very sorry, but the thing is that this is a certification workshop where we need to prepare for the certification in 3 days. From a trainer standpoint of view, I have a lot of content to cover. Hence, I'll take all the questions. I do not mind taking the questions, but you might have to wait till the break if it's on the practical, because again, this is not it's not a requirement for the certification. I have to consider all the 90, 100 people, who are there, so that everyone understands everything. So for practical questions, I'll come back to that later. But Som, I see your hand is raised. So if it's anything not related to practical, please ask me right now.
Yes, hi Jivesh, Soumya. So I have a question related to the paper use. So if I am using the machine for like 1.5 hours, so will I be paying for that 1.5 hours, or I'll be paying on hourly basis?
See, that depends upon which machine you are using and what instance you are running on. In certain cases, from my experience, what I've seen, they charge you by the hour. But previously, I have seen instances as well where I was charged under this cost running the machine just for a few minutes. But now, in general, I would say that you will be charged by the hour.
Okay,
So
understood.
it's going to be 2 hours. Okay. So I'll hit create. You guys do not have to. If you do it, you'll have to delete it again. So, you do not need to. I'll just create one quick machine for you so that I can give you a quick demo and come back to the content. It's a Windows machine. Linux machines are fast because they're lighter. Windows does take a few minutes. Oh, now I'm going to tell you something funny which happened with me a few days ago. When I was helping one of my students with Azure a few days ago, we used B1S, that's 1 CPU and 1 GB RAM on Azure, and the machine was never able to connect because the RAM was so low. So we might face that issue, but that's fine. Because ultimately our goal is to understand how can you create a resource, how can you create a resource group, right? So if I go back to my portal, I go to my virtual machine. I have a virtual machine. This is one form of a resource. My subscription is the billing. My billing is going to Azure for Students. If I click on Azure for Students, it's going to tell me that I am the owner. Please understand, I think this is going to answer a lot of questions. I'm the owner of this plan, and the users has been 0. What comes for free is this list. I can just see, along with the $100 I have these services that come for free. In this, let me search for virtual machines to show you why I selected a very low virtual machine. So you see, my free Windows virtual machine is only B1S category. Does that make sense to all of you? I am now looking in my, Azure for Students subscription, which is giving me the ability to use this machine for free. Does that make sense? Give me a thumbs up if it does. This is the reason I'm using this. I know it's very, very bad. It's a very bad idea to use a virtual machine that is so slow. But the reason I'm doing it because it's for free. And the free utilization per month is 750 hours. So that's why if I create multiple of them and I forget to turn them down, it might be beyond my free tier usage. So now I'll still be left with $100 of credit while using my top free service. And you can see this is all via Concordia University. This is my Concordia account. If you have another university account, you'll be able to see that depending upon whatever you're using. And now I'll be able to see my resource, my virtual machine has been created. I can go and connect with it. Not a part of the workshop. I know you guys are curious. I will show you how to connect to this machine, but in the break, because I want people who are interested in this. If you are like kind of super interested, you can wait. You can ask me as many questions as you want. But at the same time, I want to keep the focus of the workshop on the certification, and we will focus totally on the certification. But once in the break, obviously it's not, I won't go for a break. That's when we'll do the practical and you guys can answer your doubts about that. Everyone good with that idea? Looks fair to everyone? Because I know you guys can understand, right? 95 machines, I cannot solve 95 issues. If I do that, the others will be just signing off from the meeting. So okay, let's come back. So great. Now we just saw that a virtual machine is created and we tested that. We saw that it has been, we verified that the resource has been created. And I showed you about the subscription as well. So technically everything that we did yesterday has been covered. You might have seen it, somewhere or the other visually on the screen today. So that is a very good way of, understanding what we just saw. Now coming to the next step for the coming back to what's there for the certification, these are again some basic concepts, not super practical. We do not need to do them. We just need to know what this is, because again, you might have a question on virtual desktop. Now, one thing I'd like to tell you, so Bhargav, if you delete the VM, you get charged for 1 hour because you've already created it, right? So if you delete it within 5 minutes, 10 minutes, up to 60 minutes, it's 1 hour. Up to 120 minutes, it's 2 hours. So whenever you delete it, you'll be charged for that time. But because we are in the free subscription, we have 750 free hours per month. Bhargav, answers your question? Okay, awesome. So Gautam, you created it and deleted it. Awesome. You guys can do that. Create it, delete it, play with it, do whatever. It doesn't really matter. Fong, I will teach how to use this virtual machine that's beyond the content for the certification. So I will stop the recording in the break, and that's when I'll take that up. I hope that should not be a problem to anyone. I have about 15 to 20 slides to cover before we go for the break. So let's get into the content. All your focus on the content now. The fun time is on pause for the next 40 minutes, and then we'll go into this. Okay. Coming back. Ruchika, are you there on the call?
Yes.
I think you missed my last comment. I do not want any forms to be open right now. It just distracts everyone. Please open them close to 12.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah. So guys, coming back, Azure Virtual Desktop. So Azure Virtual Desktop is a cloud-based desktop and application virtualization service that can be accessed from any location and device. Please listen to this very carefully. It offers centralized security management with Azure Active Directory and enables multi-factor authentication and granular role-based access control to secure user sign-ins and access to data. This is done by separating data and apps from local hardware. Azure Virtual Desktop reduces the risk of confidential data being left on personal devices. Now, let me tell you what this is, okay? So people were like, they were having this issue. I'm just going to answer all your questions. Just give me 2 minutes and then I'll open chat. So once I'm done with the slide, I'll give you opportunity to ask your questions. So basic stuff. When you have employees, let's say you're running a company which has got about 100 employees. You do not want to buy a physical desktop for them. Some people maybe in the HR department might use 4 GB RAM and 4 CPUs. That'll be enough for them. Someone in the graphic design department might need 24 CPUs and maybe let's say 48 GB RAM, maybe because they're doing very high, kind of graphic designing related work. Some people, maybe in the IT department, might just be doing some regular, Python stuff. They might need 8 CPU and 16 GB RAM. So different people in our organization are in need of different kinds of resources. Now, what you could do is, instead of giving them all a different configuration laptop to, have the best utilization of your resource, it doesn't make sense to give 64 GB RAM to someone who's just using 2 or 3 out of it, right? And at the same time, it doesn't make sense to under provision someone who's using a lot of it. So just to be, more optimized, rather than giving physical desktops, Azure has a service called Azure Virtual Desktop, where one can just give, virtual appliances to the employees. The employees can log in. When you use the Azure desktop, you are leveraging things like multi-factor authentication. For example, I can't show you my fob, but when I log in into my corporate account, I need to enter my username, password, and there is some additional verification. There's a device that shows me a code. I need to enter that to enter, and that's called RSA tokens. A lot of organizations throughout the world use that for additional security. So that's like, if I leak my password, or if someone takes my password, or if I write down my password, no one will be able to log in into the account till they have the fob. And if someone has the fob, they will not know the password. So basically, it's relying your trust in more than one application to be sure that, the chances of your data being leaked reduces significantly. So your account stays secure if you're using more than one-factor authentication. Examples of multi-factor authentication can include sending OTPs, one-time passwords that you get on your phone, or using applications such as Authenticator. Let me show this to you. So there's this application, Google Authenticator. I have linked it to one of my accounts. I'm not going to go into the details, but it shows me a code. Again, it's safe for me right now because it's a non-production account. It's my personal account that I'm showing you. So this account is going to, this number is going to be refreshed every 1 minute. Now, what happens is when this number gets refreshed, for example, let's say if if I mishandle my password, like by mistake, I've kept my password to be maybe, something very easy and someone's able to hack it. With this, you see that the number got changed every minute. No one can access my account till they have this code. And this is what is called multi-factor authentication, when you're relying on more than one factor. So one factor is what the person knows. The second factor is what the person has. And you can use behavior biometrics. It goes on and on and on. Okay. Now coming back to what this thing does is it uses role-based access control. For example, if you are the IT admin, you can access everyone's machine to troubleshoot. If you are the HR, you can, make sure that there's one folder where you have the access, where you can put people's payroll information so that they can access it. So Azure Virtual Desktop, in simple words, is a service which gives you a virtual desktop. You could be running the virtual desktop from any device. That means you can be using an iPad to connect to it. You could be using a laptop to connect to it. You can be using a Windows machine, a Macintosh machine, a Linux machine to connect to that virtual environment. It's a virtual desktop hosted in Azure. Does that make sense to all of you? Give me a thumbs up if it does. If you have any questions, now is your time to raise your hands and ask questions. Yes, AKM, go ahead.
So in Azure Virtual Desktop, we have to buy a laptop at least. Maybe it's low quality, maybe it's a 4 GB or 8 GB RAM, but what will happen using that 4 GB RAM laptop, we will be able to access the 64 GB resource.
Yes.
Right? Is my concept correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So it will lower the cost of overall organization cost. Okay, sounds good.
I'll say not fully, but it gives you flexibility. If you buy hardware for 64 GB and then the employer realizes that they only need 32, you cannot take out the 32 GB RAM and sell it, right? But if, let's say, you give everyone a basic configuration laptop, or everyone uses their own laptop, because people have that, you give them a virtual laptop, they just connect to it. If there's a requirement, you increase resources. If there's no requirement, you decrease the resources.
Yes, got it. Thank you.
Okay. Next, let's go to Azure Containers. Again, this is a very theoretical service that you need to know from the exam standpoint of view, nothing very detailed. So containers are lightweight and agile virtualization environment that allows you to run multiple virtual machines on a single physical or virtual host. Azure Container Instances is a platform as a service. Now, please understand this carefully. It is not IaaS. This is PaaS. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So Azure Containers Instances is a platform as a service offering that allows you to run containers in Azure without managing any virtual machines. Containers are often used with a microservice architecture to break solutions into smaller independent pieces that can be maintained, scaled, or updated independently. I'm not sure how many of you have heard of Docker or have used Docker. For those of you who know Docker, let me make it simple for you. Docker is containerization. This is what we're talking about here. Okay. This is like an Azure version of containerizing. Yes, till what we covered yesterday, let's say we have a requirement of a virtual machine, right? Let's say we want to host a website. Please understand this carefully. It's a very simple concept if you look at it. I could either have my own machine in infrastructure as service where I tell I want this RAM, I want this CPU, I want this size of hard disk, and I want the operating system as Windows. The choice that you were shown that we just saw right now was virtual machine was an infrastructure as a service. Once you have that, once you create that machine, you have to install, let's say if it's a Python website, you need to install Python. You need to install Apache web server. You need to write your own code and you need to upload it to the machine. You are doing everything over there. You're not concerned about the physical. So it is physically located in an Azure data center. So you don't need to be worried about power supply. Please understand the difference. If this was, an on-premise, I need to be concerned about power supply. I need to be concerned about physical security. I need to be concerned about buying the machine. But since it's a infrastructure as a service, Azure has already bought it for me. We have provisioned the machine. We are only paying for the resources that we are consuming. We are only paying for the number of hours we are running it. But in virtual machine, we select our own operating system. We install our own programming language. We write our own code. In containers, it's platform as a service. So we go to Azure. Azure, this is a Docker container. Container is nothing. It's a package where you have your code and you have the platform app along with the system bundled together. So you're like, Azure, this is a package. Just take this from me and host it on your own. So Azure is not telling you how it is hosting it. In the background, it is using, one machine to host multiple of your containers. And you are only, the management gets very easy for you because you are not managing each and every part of it. Does that make sense? At a very broad level. Yes, Pranay, go ahead.
Yeah, Jivish. So my question is like you said, container is a package, like where we give the source code and the requirement. Let's say we require this date. Let's say I'm using a container. I give the source code, I give the database, I give the network, and these are the network and these are the databases I want to use to the Azure. And Azure creates all of that, right? That is what you're saying.
Yep, just give me a minute.
As a bundle, basically.
Yes, I'll virtually draw this because I think it's kind of important. Okay, so when we talk about virtual machines, this is an Azure service. So let me write Azure in front of it. The one that I was just showing you in the practical. So Azure virtual machines, this is IaaS, that is infrastructure as a service. Okay. In this IaaS infrastructure as service machine, we have selected our own configuration. For example, we select what is the size of the RAM. We are the ones who are going to select what will be the operating system. We are the ones who are going to install the platform. So platform is like the programming language, okay? Platform, or this could be the compiler, programming language, whatever you want to call it. Not want a lot of confusions. So Along with this, the next thing that you install is your source code. This is what you are doing when you are working with a virtual machine. So you are managing all this on your own, okay, with Azure Virtual Machine, because this is infrastructure as a service. Now, what happens is, so this is your responsibility. When you come to platform as a service, something like Azure containers, they are taking care of everything on their own. All you have to go and give them is you have to give them the source code, you have to give them the platform, you have to basically combine both of them together so that you have a combination of this, and then they are taking care of everything on their own. That's why you're just telling them which. So either you can ask them to give you a platform like Python, where you're just uploading your code, or specifically with the Azure Container Service, you have created a container. A container is a combination of your programming language, your dependencies, and your source code all bundled together in one part. So what happens is, when you give them the container, they have their own base operating system, they have their own RAM, they have all the other services. You just give them this part of the story. And that's why this Azure container comes to be under the PaaS category of services. Does this make sense to all of you?
Yes, yes, yeah.
So if anyone is talking about Azure platform service, is talking about Azure container, always remember Azure, like an exam question will be, is Azure container IaaS, PaaS, or SAS? So Azure container is PaaS. Azure virtual machine is IaaS. Again, I'll be talking about these questions later, because in certain cases, they could be playing the role of IaaS and PaaS together as well, certain services. So not to get confused with that, this is just an example that I'm giving you at this point of time. Okay, so Azure Container is platform as a service. You bundle them together. The reason why you bundle them, you write code in Python 3.7, right? Let's say, for example, and you are the one who realizes that Python 3.7 works best for your use case. So in that case, you do not want the version to be changed. Let's say on cloud, if someone is downloading, they might end up installing version 3.7.1, whereas your best supported version is 3.7.2. So if you do not want that sort of confusion, the best way to work around it is for developers. The developer is like, hey, cloud, this is what I have. This is what works best with this dependency. Rather than you guessing and me wanting to install something again and again, I'm going to bundle everything together. Whenever I want to deploy it, please use this deployment so that I do not need to do the task again and again. Plus, containers are also lightweight. They're lightweight because every time you create a virtual machine, you have a dedicated operating system and RAM, right? Here, you do not have anything dedicated. You're just giving them this. They're running it on a shared infra. Does that make sense, Bhargav? Any questions around this, anyone? If you're all good, give me a thumbs up.
Sir, should we are you referring to uploading an image of a Docker container?
Kind of, yes. You could do that with the Azure Container Service. You can take your Docker container where you have installed the platform where you've got the source code. Take it as because image is basically a bundle of the state. Just upload that image on the Azure Container Service and you'll be good to go. So I think, again, coming back, as I've mentioned this couple of times, let me explain it. Let me say this for one more time, that when you are talking about the Azure fundamental certifications, they expect you to know things from a very broad overview. You do not need to know things in a lot of detail. You just need to know what each and every service is doing, because they expect you to know about a lot of services, that what they are doing, they do not expect you to know how to do that task. That is for higher level certifications that comes up. Okay. Next is application hosting options. Let's say if you want to host an application, what are the options that you have? So the first thing that pops up, the first service we'll talk about is Azure App Service. So Azure App Service is a hosting service that allows you to build and host web applications. Now, this is more of like, a step ahead from IaaS. Please understand what happens over here. So you can have applications like web applications, mobile backends, RESTful APIs, or it supports languages such as .NET, .NET Core, Java, Ruby, Node.js, PHP, Python, and it offers stuff like automatic scaling and high availability. Now, this is where we are talking about PaaS. Please understand this. When we talk about IaaS, we need to do everything on our own. We need to choose the operating system. We install the platform. That is one of these programming languages. Let's say if you are creating a website and your website is running on .NET or maybe Java or maybe Node.js or PHP, you will have to install these, you'll have to install Java compiler, right? You'll have to install Java runtime environment to run the application, or you might want to install the PHP interpreter to interpret PHP, or maybe the Python interpreter to interpret Python, depending upon what language your code is written in. At that time, when you're doing it on your own in IaaS, it is a lot of work for you, and that's why it is cheaper. In Azure App Service or Container Service, you are letting Azure do that for you. And that's why it's more expensive, but it is easier on the developers because you go to Azure, like, hey, this is my source code in one of those popular, programming languages, and you connect maybe your GitHub and you are good to go. It is automatically going to do the deployment for you. Does that make sense to all of you? It is very similar to container because this is also a platform as a service, but here the thing is slightly different. Let me go back to sharing my draw.io screen. So as we were talking about virtual machine, we were talking about Azure Container. Here we have another third one, which we were talking about Azure App Service. And this Azure App Service is an example of platform as a service as well, but here it is slightly different. Here you are selecting a platform offered by Azure, and you are just giving your source code. Please understand the difference. When we talk about IaaS, we decide what will be the RAM, we decide what is the base operating system, we decide we have to install our own platform, we have to write our own source code. In Azure containers, we can bundle the platform and the source code together, like such as a Docker container. We give the container to Azure and it is hosting it for us. In Azure App Service, we do not need to bundle anything. We just tell that, this is the platform we want to select and we put in our own source code. I have a question in the chat. It says, is it similar to Lambda in AWS? No, it is similar to Elastic Beanstalk in AWS. Lambda is function as a service. That's totally different. This is more of like Elastic Beanstalk. Here you are selecting a platform and you are hosting it. So it is giving you something dedicated. Lambda, you're only uploading a part of your code which is getting run on demand. In this, it's an active website. In Lambda, you cannot run an active website, right? You cannot have a continuous running server. It is running on demand. Every time a request is coming, it is running. But here, Azure App Service is running continuously. So if you have a requirement for hosting something like Node.js, you could be using it. Selecting a platform is not selecting a resource. Selecting a platform is selecting a programming language. So you need to tell this that what is the language in which you have written your code. So if your code is in Python, you'll have to select Python. If it is in PHP, you'll have to select PHP. Does that make sense? Who was it in the chat? Bhargav, clear? Okay, awesome. So let me show this. So this is infrastructure as service. Let me take blue for this. For platform as service, I'll be taking this color. And here the user is selecting both of them. So user inputs will be marked in green. and here the user input is marked in green. Here you need to bundle it on your own, use a Docker container, upload your container. In app service, you are just like, I can select one of them. It makes your life much easier. Again, it has options of auto scaling and things of that sort. But you don't need to worry about the underlying operating system. So you're like, okay, I have a budget of so and so dollars. So you can scale up if there are more users, but do not scale beyond this. But other than that, the RAM and operating system, everything is optimized and managed by Azure, hence making the service slightly more premium and slightly more expensive, because your work is being reduced, but work is getting added up to Azure, and they're definitely going to be charging you for that. Does that make sense? If it does, give me a thumbs up. Just want to be sure everyone's still active and listening to what I'm saying. All clear about Azure App Service? If not, raise your hand. Otherwise, give me a thumbs up. Okay.
I just had a quick doubt with regards to the app service.
Yeah, go ahead.
And it's like how it differs from containerization. In so let's say like on containerization, we get to choose like our RAM and our like CPUs and all, but like with app service, they're scaling it automatically.
Okay, let me tell you the difference. In container, you're not selecting the RAM and the operating system again, but in container, you are telling that you have installed your own version of the operating system. Sorry, you have installed your own version of the platform. For example, now this is where I'm going to be talking a little bit about programming. So for those of you who are new to programming, please don't get confused. Because this is not going to be asked in the exam. It's just to answer Saurabh's question. Let's say if you're writing code on Node.js application, you would know that Node.js has a lot of dependencies, right? Where you need to do an npm install, which is going to install a lot of third-party dependencies for you. So if you feel that those versions can update in future and you do not want to keep a track of which version was working best for your machine, you want to lock that. You essentially create a container where you have installed all the dependencies. You've installed the base, the base Linux or whatever you're using as a base OS. And on top of that, you've written your source code. So you have all the dependencies, you have your version of programming language, you have your version of the source code, you bundle it together so that no one can change it. It's more foolproof, right? Whenever it is running as a package. There's no probability of it breaking until something very major happens. But in Azure App Service, you are relying with the platform that is offered by Azure. So Azure is telling you, I have this version of Node, I have this version of Python, I have this version of Java. You select their version, you upload your code. So you are just uploading the code and you're selecting a platform. But over here, you are creating a bundle where you have installed your own platform, your own source code, put it together, and then you are uploading it on the container service. Make sense?
Yep, thank you.
So ultimately, you are not managing the RAM and the base operating system of the virtual machine. You are just managing the code and the programming language or the platform in simple terms. It's just that here you bundle it, put it as a bundle, and here you select one and put your source code. Okay, Gautam, go ahead.
So, for example, just we can say that backup that we take, like a snapshot of a system, is a container.
No. Basically, it is a snapshot of the code that you are running. For example, if your code is working in that programming, that specific version of dependencies of that specific version of that programming language compiler or programming language interpreter, depending upon whatever you are using. Like for example, Java has a Java virtual machine, right? Like that specific JVM with that specific version of Tomcat, with that specific version of your code, you are just putting it, bundling it all together, and you're uploading it. So backup has a lot of other details. So if you say it's a backup of code, yes, you can say it's the state of your code. Backup might not be the right term to use. Make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So in the app service, version of dependent library changed by itself? No, I won't say it changes by itself, but let's not talk about the library, but let's say if you want to use one very specific version of Python, it might not be available out of the selected list. It might have 3.7, It might not have 3.7.x, the specific that you need. So it's best if you have tested it on your local machine, you bundle it and then you upload it if it's a very critical application which has a probability, which is using a lot of dependencies which break very frequently. But if it is an application which you have tested well in advance, you might not worry. You might just go with the Azure App Service. Make sense? Bhargav? Okay, awesome. I think we've covered quite a lot in terms of Azure App Service. Let's go on to the next thing that we are talking about. That is that is web apps. So when we talk about app service in a hosting service, so app service is a hosting service. So this is more of like the same thing that we've already discussed. It's an extension to that. We've already covered everything in this slide. So you can see you can choose Windows or Linux, but again, you do not have the same flexibility what you have in IIS, right? You could be telling that, okay, I want to run PHP on Windows. You cannot be telling very specifically, this is the version of Windows that I wanted to run. So in simple words, app service is designed to handle all the infrastructure management tasks, which are like deployment, scaling, making an excellent choice for web hosted applications. For example, it is more of like a manager service, which is not doing anything on itself. It is just consuming your other services that are underlying, but in a very I'll say in a very managed fashion, so that you don't have to do all the work. It is doing a lot of hard work for you of deployment. Soham, what did I say about snapshots? Where was I talking about snapshots? Can you just give me a little more context in the chat so that I can come back? While I'll continue with API apps, you can just put your question in the chat, because just a little more clarity so that I could answer it. So there's another thing called as API apps. So Azure App Services allows you to build, this is again, we're talking about what Azure App Service allows you to do. You could just give me a moment. So when we talked about Azure App Service, it could be used for multiple, use cases. So this, the exact thing that we're talking about here is the use case. So when we talk about the first use case of Azure App, it is hosting web applications. So you can choose, what programming language you want to choose, and maybe the version of the operating system, but nothing further than that. You cannot choose the RAM, you cannot choose the disk, you cannot choose the networking. It is automatically going to do everything for you, and that's why this web application hosting is one of the best use case for the Azure App Service. Going on, when we go to API apps, this is for running application programming interfaces. So for example, for those of you who know what's an API, that's great. For those of you who do not, let's say I want to create a website which is giving me the weather information of Montreal. So obviously it's very unpractical to install sensors, temperature sensors across the city and gather that data, because I might want to do it in Montreal, I might want to do it in Vancouver, I might want to do it in Halifax, I might want to do it in New York, and that's not feasible. So maybe there might be another organization or a company that is gathering that data and that is sharing it with us. So when I want to be a consumer of that data, I need to interact with that company, right? For example, weather.com, okay? So let's say weather.com or weather.org is giving temperature data, and I want my website to show that temperature data. I do not need to create my own, I do not need to create my own service, because it's going to be very expensive to install physical hardware. I could just be using someone else's code where they are maybe taking some rent out of me in terms of the number of requests that I make. And then they would be giving me some JSON data, like, temp is in Montreal is, for example, -1. And then along with that, they might tell me that the wind speed is, let's say, 20. And again, I'm just giving some random information, right? And then they might say that the city that you're talking about is Montreal, and information of that sort. The sunrise is this time, the sunset is this time, blah, blah, blah. This is key value pairs, right? There's a key, there's a value associated with this. This is what is the role of an API. So when you want to create an API, you could be creating APIs on Azure, which would make your life a little easy. So APIs, for those of you who do not know, programming to that extent is just data in a specific JSON or an XML format. If I have to give you an example of this, because again, I'm quite sure some people might be confused. Let's say, let me show you an example API. Yeah. So there you go. So this is what an API looks like. So this is again not very logical, but if it was weather API, it will be giving you information such as weather. So it's giving you data in key value pairs, like the type is article, the ID is one, the attributes are JSON API paints by bike shed, and then the bodies, the shortest article ever, and things of that sort, right? So basically, if you want to create a service that is not a front-end website, that is a backend where you're storing data in key value pairs and you want to share that with the users, you are essentially referring to an API. Does that make sense to all of you? In simple terms, API is the backend. So when people want to share information with each other, they could be doing that via APIs. So when you want to create an API, the version, that's again a very good use case when you talk about the Azure app services. Does that make sense to all of you? Give me a thumbs up if it does. And now let me see what's going on in the chat. You mentioned something about system application snapshots, I believe, and compared it to a container. Okay, no, that was just a question that I was answering for someone else's understanding. So I do not want to go with that so that people get confused. Okay, so there are two majorly types of APIs, though there are many more, but the most common ones are REST and SOAP. Again, that's not a part of this workshop. With cloud computing, it's more of, the deployments, and it's more of the infrastructure. So when we need to know a little bit about, the programming terminology, but essentially we do not need to know what they are. So what you just saw right now, the key value pairs, that is an example of a REST API. Bhargav, does that answer your question? Okay, there's nothing like a normal API. It's either REST, it's either SOAP, or it's either GraphQL. There are so many options, but again, not for this workshop, obviously. So won't go into that. Another thing that you could be doing is web jobs. So web jobs run programs or scripts in the same context as a web app, API app or mobile app. They can be scheduled or triggered. So this is basically like, jobs. Let me give you an example. For example, you want to send emails to people at 12 a.m. every day, marketing emails. That could be a job. So it runs in the background. You do not need to do it automatically. Or let's say if it's someone's birthday, you have a database of your 1,000 employees, you want to wish everyone on their birthday. You could run a web job for that. That is, it is going to run, it's like a cron job for those of you who know Linux, that is running on Azure. So it'll be running in the background. It's going to do, it's going to run in the background. It's going to call a couple of APIs. It's if that is how the code is written, and it will be performing a task that is to go and do something with the web. Does that make sense to all of you? Again, it's basic, right? As I told you, for the Azure certification, you need to know a lot of terminology. You do not need to know the details of each and every one of them. Now, there are certain topics where we spent hours and hours because that was the core foundation. Certain topics you might just want to know that, okay, this term refers to so and so thing. And when we talk more about questions next week, you'll understand better. So another thing that you could be using is mobile apps. The mobile app feature and app service will allow for the quick creation of a backend for iOS and Android application. It includes SQL database storage. Basically, it's in-memory databases as well. It supports that. Some authentication services, push notifications, and some custom backend logic in C# or Node.js. So basically, in mobile app feature. So this is, again, we are talking about what the app service could be used for. You could be using the app service for either running web applications or running APIs or running web jobs or writing the backend, the logic where you're connecting it to the database for mobile applications as well. If everyone understands this, give me a thumbs up for all 4 of them. As I'm saying, these are not 4 different services. These are the 4 different uses of the application, the Azure App Service. If everyone understands this, give me a thumbs up. Awesome. Okay. So just a minute. Let me go back to sharing my screen once again. Okay, so we've already covered all the way to slide 63 till now, which I would say is a good, a good standpoint. We have quite a few other things to cover, but at the very same time, a lot of you would want to, continue with the practical. A lot of you might want your lunch break right now. So I'll give you guys a stop. Please listen to me before you go. There are a few things that I want to talk about before you go. Just give me 2 minutes. We have covered a lot in terms of the understanding of Azure. Trust me, if we continue at the same pace, by the end of 3rd session, we'll complete everything required for AZ-900. I do understand the fact that just listening to me once is not enough. This is going to help you a lot when you are, asking your doubts, the doubts that you're asking. So you'll have a very good understanding from this, but at the very same time, you need to review all the documentation one time at least before you can consider yourself prepared for the certification. If you understand everything, you can skim through it. Just be very fast with it. Otherwise, go through the documentation in detail. It'll be really helpful for you, and you'll be good to go for the certification. Now, 2 things to add to this. First, if you have not filled your attendance form already, now is the time to fill that. Ruchika, can you share that once with everyone in the chat? As I've already mentioned, for those of you who will be attending all the sessions, would be given the certificates. Second point that I want to discuss right now is that let me just stop the recording so that I can proceed further. So the recordings are short.